Chapter 30, 220. Lin Cece looked at him, bit her lip, and said innocently, "Then I'll kill you." He stared at her and asked her softly, "Really?" Lin Cece hugged him, looking a little impatient, but more delicate. "Guze, are you done? You're always looking for excuses." He grabbed her and dragged her to a small hotel nearby, threw down 200 yuan, took the key, and went to the room. In that narrow, shabby room they were as vivid as they could be. All the things he had never used before, was unwilling to use, and was too ashamed to use, were all used. She was the same to him. No one cared about face and no one cared about who they were. They just wanted to please each other's body until they were exhausted. After that, they hugged each other on the simple, sweaty bed. Lin Cece lay on his lower abdomen, moved her little fingers gently, and said happily, "Guze, how nice it would be if we could always be like this." He smiled. "If we can always be like this, I'll probably die." He reached out and pinched her face. "How many times have you done it today? Have you counted?" Lin Cece pinched him and complained, "That's why I said you're old." Guze put one hand behind his head and looked at her. "If you want more, you'll have to wait for an hour." Lin Cece giggled, climbed into his arms, and put her arms around his neck. "I'll have to call you uncle in the future." Guze was still looking at her. Suddenly, he grabbed her arm and pressed her down. "The next second," she whispered, "isn't it an hour later? Do you still want to call me uncle?" He bit her ear. This time, he deliberately tortured her, making her feel like she was dying, and she no longer had the energy to provoke him. It wasn't until late that she was allowed to sleep. Early in the morning, Guze was woken up by Lin Cece. She was still lying in his arms, looking up at him like a baby, with a face full of curiosity. Guze smiled and kissed her little mouth. "Why aren't you sleeping? What time is it?" He reached for the bedside watch and said, "It's only 8 o'clock. Cece, you're so energetic." Lin Cece was still staring at him. "Guze, aren't you hungry?" Guze smiled. He clearly knew what she was talking about, but he still deliberately touched the place where he touched her last night. "Hungry again?" Lin Cece screamed, "I'm talking about my stomach." "Then feed me first, eh?" He rolled over and kissed her as much as he could, pressing her little body. He didn't really do anything to her. He just kissed her and enjoyed the beauty. Lin Cece was tormented by him until she looked like a little lunatic. Her long black hair was a mess, and her little mouth was slightly red and swollen. She looked even younger. He smiled. She wasn't young anymore, but perhaps it was because she was too small and because she was heartless. She really looked younger than people of the same age. He kissed her again and again. Lin Cece reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck, smiling foolishly. "I want to eat breakfast in a 5-star hotel," she said coquettishly. "Guze, there are so many bugs here. I've been bitten a lot." "Really? Let me see." He chuckled, lifted the quilt, picked her up, and walked into the narrow bathroom. Fortunately, there was always a half-length mirror in the bathroom, and she was pressed against it. Chapter 30, 221. Lin Cece hid and lay on his shoulder. "Not here." He smiled and went down again. "Here or here, Every time he changed a place, she would scream. Even Guze couldn't take it anymore. He laughed and said, "Only these places? Are there any others?" As he said that, he became a little emotional. Lin Cece turned around and hugged him. "No more." She lay on his shoulder and begged softly, "I really can't take it anymore. Don't do it anymore, okay?" Guze smiled and let her go. He carried her back to the simple room and helped her put on her clothes. Lin Cece lay comfortably in his arms and asked softly, "Where are we going? Didn't you say that we're going to eat breakfast at a 5-star hotel? Let's go get a room." Guze helped her put on her clothes and put her down. He stood up and put on his black jacket without hesitation. Lin Cece's face was slightly red as she watched from the side. His figure was really good. She was very curious about how he could maintain such a good figure even though he sat in the office every day. She reached out and secretly poked him twice. Guze glanced at her and she immediately ran away. Walking out of the simple hotel, the sun was shining brightly outside. Lin Cece hung on his arm. President Gu, do you feel like you're overdoing it? Gu Zhe looked at her. What do you think? She walked around him and always had something to say. Gu Zhe eventually found her annoying, so he grabbed her in his arms and kissed her. Then they didn't manage to eat breakfast at the five-star hotel. He brought her back to the villa and fooled around for the whole morning before letting her sleep in the afternoon. In the week in Sea City, they were very indulgent, as if there was no tomorrow. It was as if they didn't need to care about anything else. Other than eating and sleeping, they spent all their time making love. After a week, Gu Zhe brought her back to B City. Because Yi Mubai and Bai Xueli's official wedding was going to be held, Gu Zhe had to attend. He brought Lin Cece to live in his villa. At first, Lin Cece was reluctant, especially when she was unwilling to lie on his bed. Gu Zhe knew that she couldn't get over what had happened that day because he had forced himself on her on this bed. Then, that night, there was no child no more. He came out of the bathroom and saw Lin Cece lying on the sofa reading a magazine. She was wearing an oversized bathrobe. It was his. He walked over and bent over to hug her. Why aren't you sleeping? You've been crazy for the whole day. Are your feet tired? Lin Cece sat up a little straighter in his arms and said in a low voice, I don't want to sleep yet. Gu Zhe picked her up and placed her on the soft bed. He said in a low voice, go to sleep. Her little body wanted to get up. He pressed her down, his expression gentle. Be good. Lin Cece looked into his eyes and bit her lower lip, unable to say a word. Gu Zhe buried his face in her neck and said in a low and hoarse voice, Cece, I'm sorry for that day. She stared into his eyes for a long time before she reached out and hugged his neck. She didn't say anything and just buried her face in his arms. After a while, he felt that his clothes were wet and hot. He hugged her tighter. Don't cry, okay? We'll still have children. You've already had a vasectomy, she said gloomily. Gu Zhe smiled and kissed her hair. I lied to you. If I really had a vasectomy, why would I always wear one? So silly. Chapter 32:22. Lin Cece glared at him and stretched out her little hand to hit his shoulder. Gu Zhe, you're so bad. He laughed calmly and lay down with her in his arms. He held her in his arms and reached out to stroke her back, comforting her silently. Probably because of the topic of the vasectomy, Lin Cece was not as stiff as before. After staying in his arms for a while, she turned around and looked at him eagerly. Gu Zhe, are you really going to Yimubai's wedding? Gu Zhe lowered his head and pressed his forehead against her. He invited you too, didn't he? Cece, let's go together, okay? Lin Cece was a little hesitant. Won't it be inappropriate? Why not? He smiled and patted her little head. Okay, go to sleep. She was still a little nervous, but Gu Zhe just hugged her and let her feel the warmth of his body. He did nothing else. Slowly, she relaxed and fell asleep in his arms. Early in the morning, when Lin Cece woke up, Gu Zhe was already dressed. He bent down and kissed her on the lips. I have to go to the company. I'll come back early in the afternoon to pick you up for the dinner party. Lin Cece nodded. Gu Zhe did not leave immediately. Instead, he paused for a moment and murmured, You can also take a look so that we can hold another wedding. Lin Cece wrapped herself in the quilt and refused without thinking. No, it will be very embarrassing. Gu Zhe pinched her little face. Do you think I'm old? I'm a few months younger than old Bai. Lin Cece leaned against the headboard and stuck out her tongue. Old Bai hasn't used it before. I don't know how it is. Gu Zhe smiled and didn't say anything. He went to work. Lin Cece was a little bored. She got up and walked around the villa. The servants here all knew her and took good care of her breakfast and lunch. Lin Cece slept again after lunch. In the afternoon, a styling studio sent 2 dresses for her to choose. Lin Cece opened the box. One was blue, and the other was a classic black Chanel dress. Lin Cece actually wanted to wear the black one, but considering that it was impolite to wear black at a wedding, she changed into the blue one. That was a haute couture set from a high-end brand. It had a red stripe, revealing a little of the snow-white skin on the back. The long skirt was exquisitely embroidered, and the unit price was at least 1 million. This was specially custom-made by President Gu for Miss Lin. It fits her well. The staff said in an envious tone, "Miss Lin, you can keep the Chanel set for the reception." Mr. Gu has also prepared a set of camellia jewelry for Miss Lin. "Miss Lin, you can try it on." Lin Cece smiled faintly. "Not today. It's quite troublesome to switch back and forth." "That's true." The staff combed and styled her hair. Lin Cece's face was especially small, and she was slender. In the end, they decided to comb her hair into a bun. It was simple, but especially young and good-looking. Lin Cece even felt that it was very light when she held the hem of the dress. She looked in the mirror and saw Gu Zhe coming back with a box in his hand. Lin Cece turned her head. "Is it for me?" Gu Zhe signaled the staff to leave with his eyes. He walked over slowly and opened the box in front of her. There was a colorful necklace lying inside. There was no main diamond, but the design was very beautiful and matched the dress very well. "Do you like it?" He lowered his head and rubbed her little nose. Chapter 32-23. "I'll help you put it on." He hugged her from behind and gently bit her white and tender neck. "I really don't want to take you out." She just trembled and said nothing. Gu Zhe helped her put it on, and then stood beside her and looked at them in the mirror. Lin Cece also noticed that he had changed a set of clothes, which was obviously for formal occasions. "Actually, you're also very handsome today." Lin Cece gently hugged his neck. Gu Zhe couldn't help kissing her, handed her the handbag, and carried her downstairs. He hugged her like a princess and let her rest on his shoulder in the car. The car arrived at the GM Hotel an hour later. Tonight was the wedding banquet of a second son of the Yi family and the only daughter of the Bai family. It was held in the most luxurious hotel in B City, GM. Even Tang Yu and Pei Chichi, who hadn't appeared for a long time, also appeared, but they only showed up for about 10 minutes, which was a great respect for the Yi family and the Bai family. When Gu Zhe arrived, he happened to meet Yi Muyun and Tang Sher. Yi Muyun had always been good-looking, and Tang Sher had the good genes of her parents. People would think that they were married if they just stood there casually. Gu Zhe went over to greet Yi Muyun. They used to be superior and subordinate. Later, when Gu Zhe ran away, Yi Muyun still took care of him very much. At this time, he couldn't help but say a few more words when they met. Yi Muyun saw Lin Cece for the first time, and his eyes became a little thoughtful. He looked at Gu Zhe and smiled faintly. "Does she know what you're thinking about?" Gu Zhe looked at Lin Cece, who was talking to Tang Sher, and said in a slightly low voice, "She doesn't know yet." Yi Muyun smiled again. "She'll know soon." "Gu Zhe, are you sure you want to tell her the truth so soon?" "A long night is fraught with trouble." Gu Zhe smiled. "Maybe she can't guess it." Yi Muyun looked at his wife and smiled. "Do you think she's as stupid as my milkshake?" Gu Zhe took a glass of red wine, pondered for a moment, and also smiled. Yi Muyun also picked up a cup and clinked it with him. "If I'm not mistaken, you might end up fighting tonight. Don't drink too much, or you won't hold back." Gu Zhe felt a pain in his heart, and his voice became soft. "I won't hurt her. Once was enough, and the price was too high." At that moment, Lin Cece and Tang Shui came over. Tang Shui walked in front of Yi Muyun and yawned. "Big brother, I want to go home and sleep." Even now, she was still used to calling Yi Muyun Big Brother. Clearly, Yi Muyun enjoyed it very much. He hugged his wife and said, "There will be a wonderful show in a while. Don't you want to watch it?" Tang Sher hugged his arm. "I want to sleep." After Yi Muyun knew that she was pregnant, he was not interested in anything except sleeping. If it weren't for today's special occasion, she wouldn't have come. He smiled and took his leave, although it was quite a pity. Gu Zhe watched them leave, and then looked back at Lin Cece. "What are you looking at?" Lin Cece stuck out her tongue. "Your former boss seems to be more handsome than you." Gu Zhe glanced at her. "He is the son of Yi Liangqiu and Qin Anlin. His genes are a little better than mine." In fact, many people didn't know that Yi Muyun was named after Tang Yu in business. He sold himself to the Tang family for the milkshake when he was 10 years old. It was quite crazy. Maybe the Qin family had many children, so he was willing. Chapter 32-24. As Guze was thinking, Qinmu, whom he had liked for many years, and Zhou Chengguang appeared together, holding hands. He looked at Qinmu and stared at him for a long while. Lin Cixi also looked up at him. After a moment, Guze's eyes fell on Lin Cixi's face, and he smiled. The atmosphere was a little strange at that moment. Guze? Qin Shu smiled and came over to greet him. Her eyes fell on Lin Cixi's face, and she smiled very gently. Even Zhou Chengguang was smiling warmly at them. He was very tolerant of his wife's former admirers, probably because he was confident, because no matter what, Qin Mu's eyes were always on him. There had never been anyone else. Lin Cixi looked at Zhou Chengguang, looked at Qin Mu, and then looked at Guze. Guze was looking at Qin Mu, and Lin Cixi suddenly smiled. "What's wrong?" Guze held her hand and asked very gently. Lin Cixi's voice was so low that only he could hear it. "I'm laughing at you." At that moment, Guze's face was a little twisted, but he quickly returned to normal. At that moment, Lan Yu also came over with Qin Chen. Qin Chen accidentally recovered her memory in a car accident, and she began to wear men's clothes again. Her hair was also cut a lot shorter. Although she was not as manly as before, it was enough for Lan Yu to beat her every night. His wife changed from a famous model to a full man. However, he was still very interested in her. Qin Chen was now working in the hospital, and she also performed surgeries, but she could not do those super awesome surgeries. When she was in New York, her hands were injured because of Rong Lei, and they were not as flexible as before. But when she returned to the hospital, she was still the idol of the young nurses, Dr. Qin. Many young nurses argued not to get married because of Dr. Qin. The addition of Qin Chen and Lan Yu made Lin Cixi relax a lot. This group of people was also quite wonderful. There were many love triangles and quadruplets. Fortunately, Lan Yu's ex-wife, Tang Sher, was taken away by Yi Muyun, or it would be even more chaotic. Everyone chatted together for a while, and the men tacitly took their women away. Nowadays, there were many people who were not strong-willed. Lin Cixi walked into the hall with Guze. She looked up and saw his eyes fall on Qin Mu not far away. She smiled gently and looked down. Sure, there was still a gap between a whim and a true love. Qin Mu was the white moonlight in his heart that he couldn't obtain, and she, Lin Cixi, was, how should she put it? She was just a passerby who accompanied him on his journey. From his gaze, she could tell that Qin Mu would forever be the white moonlight in his heart. Coincidentally, she didn't take it seriously this time. At this moment, Guze placed his hand on Lin Cixi's shoulder. Yi Mubai and Bai Shuili also walked out slowly. The moment they appeared, Lin Cixi's face paled. She finally realized that she had been tricked by Guze. She had originally wanted to retreat in one piece after a month, but was calculated by this man. Guze took advantage of her and Yi Mubai's short past, and Bai Shuili's power, and she, Lin Cixi, was destined to have nowhere to run. She wasn't afraid, but she knew too well how it felt to be oppressed by power in this world. When her father was in power, she could be as arrogant as she could be. Killing a person was as easy as stepping on an ant. On the other hand, she could be stepped on by others. Chapter 32-25. It was the same high-rise dress, one on by Shuili, and the other on Lin Cixi. She was also Yi Mubai's ex-girlfriend in name. An ordinary woman couldn't stand this kind of provocation, let alone Bai Shuili, who was high and mighty. Lin Cixi stared at Bai Shuili and asked in a very soft voice, "Guze, do you want me to have no way out?" After offending Bai Shuili, she could only be safe under the protection of Guze. He really had a good plan. Before Guze said anything, Lin Cixi said again, "Will you do the same to Qin Mu?" Her hand was held and he said in a low voice, "Cixi, you know why I'm doing this, don't you?" "Yes." She took a step back, but her hand was still held by him. She couldn't break free. Lin Cixi looked at Guze. "I'll leave you in a month and take 80 millions. She said it cruelly and heartlessly. "Guze, you know I'm an actor. You wanted me to be your wife for a month, and I acted well to make you happy. This is my professionalism. There's nothing wrong with it. He stared at her and lost control in someone else's wedding. Then what about my heart? Is it destined to be torn into pieces by you? Lin Cece chuckled softly. So when your heart is broken into pieces, you choose to let others tear me apart? Guze reached out and held her in his arms. I'll protect you. Lin Cece's face was very ugly. After a long time, she smiled gently. Protect or possess? Guze, you haven't changed at all. She looked down. The one who loses power is destined to be trampled on, and is destined to be hurt without notice, right? You treated me like this in the past, and you still want to do the same to me now. She broke free from him, and didn't follow his script. In front of so many people, in front of Yi Mubai and Bai Shueli, she smiled at Yi Mubai. Old Bai, are you still willing to marry me? When Lin Cece said this, Guze was stunned. Yi Mubai was even more stunned. But when he saw the gown that Lin Cece was wearing, he knew in his heart. He became Guze's cannon fodder. There was a hint of heartache in Yi Mubai's eyes. If the girl he liked really told him, Old Bai, I regret it, I don't want to let you off, I don't want to see you marry someone else, then he would choose to walk over to her. No matter how difficult it was, he would hold her hand and never let go. Yi Mubai recalled that night when he told Cece that he was going to marry Bai Shueli. At that time, he and Cece had already progressed to the point of kissing. Cece liked him, but not to the extent of love. If she had hugged him that night and told him not to marry Bai Shueli, he would not have married her. But at that time, Cece only smiled faintly. She said, Old Bai, it doesn't matter. You can marry her. Cece had the same background as him. No one could understand his situation at that time better than she did. If he married Bai Shueli, the Yi family would be able to survive. If he didn't marry her, he, Yi Mubai, was nothing. He couldn't give Cece anything. What best actor? It was nothing in front of power. At that moment, he looked at Lin Cece. At that moment, their minds were connected. She wasn't making things difficult for him. She was giving him a way out and a chance to refuse. She had shouldered everything on her own shoulders. Chapter 30:26. He looked at Guze. Guze also looked at him. Slowly he said, Cece, stop fooling around. Go back with Guze. At this time, Bai Shueli walked to her. Lin Cece was slim and petite, while Bai Shueli was 170 centimeters tall. Bai Shueli leaned forward. Lin Cece, you still dare to fight with me for my man? Lin Cece smiled faintly. Your father used to be my father's adjutant. Bai Shueli, what you are doing now is my leftover. She pointed at Yi Mubai. So is he? Bai Shueli smiled gently. Of course, she didn't like Lin Cece. The Lin family had fallen, and now the Yi family depended on the Bai family. She was going to slap the little princess in front of Mubai. Mubai didn't say it, but she actually knew that he had liked this little bitch for a long time. She had liked it since she was young. At that time, Lin Cece was a homo, always following behind Qin Chen's butt, so Mubai did not make a move. Now, in the blink of an eye, Guze had played with her once, and he actually took it back as a treasure. Now she wanted Mubai to see clearly that it was different now. Who was the treasure, and who was the trash? Bai Shueli directly raised her hand and gave Lin Cece a slap before anyone could react. Lin Cece's face was slapped to the side. She didn't care about Bai Shueli but turned her face to the side and looked at Guze. There was a touch of mockery at the corner of her mouth. Guze stepped forward to hold her hand, but it was too late. Her body was hugged by Yi Mubai. A small one, curled up in his arms. Bai Shueli stood and looked at Yi Mubai. Do you want to break up the marriage? Yi Mubai lowered his head and looked at Lin Cece in his arms. Do you mean what you said just now? Lin Cece looked at him. Yi Mubai gives a wry smile and reaches out to caress her face, which has 5 finger marks on it. What should I do? I feel distressed when you get hit. He looked up at the people around him, including his parents. He said firmly, I won't marry her. Let Yi Mulin marry her. Gasps could be heard all around. Damn, there's actually such a thing? Yi Mubai hugged Lin Cece and looked at Guze. I thought you would wait for her to recover, But you don't love her. You always put yourself first. So, I want her back. In front of so many people, Yimu Bai kissed Lin Cece on the wedding day that originally belonged to him. Lin Cece was also stunned. She didn't want him to do this. Even if he got slapped, he would still be going against Guzei. Her eyes were wide open, but in Yimu Bai's eyes, they were a little cute. He felt sorry for her and gentle at the same time. Lin Cece, you're not the only one who doesn't play by the rules. I can do it too. Lin Cece was dumbfounded. She really didn't want him to do this for her. What about the Yi family? Could he make a Yimu Bai appear? And could he turn back time? It was too much. Guzei narrowed his eyes and immediately reached out to pull Lin Cece over. She is my woman. Yimu Bai directly hit him. Is this how you treat your woman?
Bang.
The punch was not light at all. The two men inexplicably fought like two beasts. All the people present were influential people. No one dared to take pictures because of their identities. And the wedding had to go on. Yimu Bai and Guzei were driven to the lounge by 8 strong men. They let them fight, including Lin Cece. Chapter 32-27. At the wedding venue, Bai Shuali was still in shock and disbelief. She slapped Mu Bai and sent him away. Mu Bai said that he didn't want to marry her. He wanted to be with Lin Cece. What did Lin Cece have now? She had nothing except her face. Even Xiong was not as big as Bai Shuali. Bai Shuali was a very stubborn girl. She got whatever she wanted since she was young. Yimu Bai was someone she wanted but couldn't get. She was going to eat me tonight, but Lin Cece lured him away with just a few words. Bai Shuali's hand was held before she could cry. She was stunned. She wanted to call Mu Bai, but when she looked up, it was the eldest son of the Yi family. Yi Mulin. Her eyes opened wide. She didn't want to marry this man with a poker face. It was said that he couldn't do it, so he didn't have a wife. She wanted to break free, but her eyes met her father's. His eyes told her that it wasn't the time for her to be stubborn. She had to clean up the mess she made. Bai Shuali's eyes were filled with something hot. She wanted to cry. Yi Mulin's tone was cold and low. Don't think that I'm willing. Cooperate. She gritted her teeth and said with a trembling voice, Is this a fake marriage? Yi Mulin didn't answer her. A family like theirs wouldn't allow a fake marriage. Mu Bai was stubborn for once. He couldn't let Bai Shuali go again. Yi Mulin knew that in the eyes of the Bai family, Bai Shuali's value was much higher than Mu Bai's. He didn't want to marry, but he had to sacrifice it now. He was a good lawyer, but he didn't know how to coax girls. He didn't have the patience to do so. Especially, he didn't like Bai Shuali at all. She was shallow, exaggerated, and probably had surgery on her face. She was a far cry from the traditional, intellectual woman in his mind. Among so many women from prestigious families, he only found Qin Mu pleasing to the eye. The others like Qin Chen, He Huan, Tang Xueber, and Lin Cece were all repulsive. The eldest son of the Yi family, Yi Mulin, was someone who looked down on women. His temper wasn't better than Yi Mu Bai's. He was a workaholic. Moreover, the wedding ceremony was simple and crude, and he took Bai Shuali away. Everything happened so fast that it was inconceivable. This man was a man of action. Since he was married to her, he had to negotiate the terms and conditions with her, then go to bed with her and give birth to the heir of the Yi clan. That night, Bai Shuali experienced what it meant to be the peak of life and to walk to the lowest valley. He narrowed his eyes. Yi Mulin was simply a devil. She was thrown on the bed. Her new husband sat on the sofa at the end of the bed with a stern face and loosened his tie. Bai Shuali wanted to cry. Wow, her meticulously prepared wedding night, sensual pajamas, 1982 red wine, and roses were all gone. She was going to spend a night with this man? He couldn't do it yet. Don't cry. Yi Mulin's voice was deep, but it was unexpectedly sexy and pleasant to the ears. He rubbed his eyebrows and looked at her. Shall we sign the contract or sign the agreement first? You motherfucker. Bai Shuali scolded. Yi Mulin, you bastard. You're older than me by more than 10 years. Are you trying to rob the cradle? She quickly climbed out of the bed and ran to the door. But he quickly grabbed her hair, dragged her back, and threw her on the bed. Yi Mulin loosened his tie and smiled faintly. Let's do it first and then talk. Marriage may wake you up a little. Chapter 30-28. Yi Mulin pulled off his tie and dragged Bai Shueli over. She screamed, What do you want to do? Yi Mulin, are you crazy? I like Yimu Bai, not you. A boring workaholic who only knows how to work all day long. Yi Mulin took off the haute couture dress directly. The new Mrs. Yi screamed again. Yi Mulin, what do you want to do? We are married, Miss Bai. I am exercising my rights as a husband. He began to kiss her neck. The new Mrs. Yi was shocked. This workaholic could even kiss. He didn't do it rudely. But the next second, tears burst out from the corner of her eyes. He squinted, and he did it directly. Yi Mulin, you bastard. You are shameless. You bastard. Pain. Bai Shueli opened her eyes wide, looking at her temporary husband. He squinted. When he did this kind of thing, he still looked like an elite. There was no expression at all. Bai Shueli beat his shoulder angrily, biting her lips with tears coming out. But these couldn't stop Yi Mulin. He didn't stop at all. He didn't show mercy to her. He didn't show mercy because it was her first time. After a while, he whispered in her ear, Don't seduce Mubai casually. You are his sister-in-law. Do you know that? Bai Shueli stared at this hateful man. I will seduce him. Tomorrow, I will drag him to bed. What she got in return was his rudeness. She screamed, Are you a pile driver? It was really painful. He was like a machine without flesh and blood. Mrs. Yi, thank you for your compliment. Yi Mulin was still expressionless. Then he announced the second rule, Don't make trouble in Yi family, understand? Bai Shueli bit her lips. I promise, I will steal a man every day. Then I will publish the photos of you and those men. Do you want to? He pinched her face and turned it into a more powerful pile driver. Damn, it hurt. Bai Shueli grabbed his back and tore his shirt. She fought with him like a crazy woman, but that man spent their wedding night violently with her, gnawing on her until not even her bones were left. From the beginning to the end, there was no pause. It took 3 hours and 8 minutes. When everything calmed down, it was already early in the morning. Yi Mulin stood up and straightened his clothes. He didn't even change his posture. Looking at Bai Shueli, who was lying there like a dried dead fish, he smiled faintly. You didn't lose out. It was my first time, too. Bai Shueli hadn't removed her makeup yet. When she heard his words, she immediately became energetic again. First time my ass. It's not a good habit to swear. You have to remember that you are Mrs. Yi now. Yi Mulin frowned and took out his phone from his pocket. He called his secretary and said, Come here. I have an agreement to sign. Bai Shueli got up from the bed and jumped behind Yi Mulin. She gritted her teeth and said, I'm not your wife. We will divorce tomorrow. Yi Mulin frowned. You weren't satisfied just now, so you want a divorce? He took her down and placed her on his lap. To be honest, Bai Shueli was beautiful, but it was a superficial kind of beauty. Everything about her was European style. Even Xiong was a fake. Chapter 30-29. Pa. She slapped his face. Yi Mulin grabbed her hand and said thoughtfully, I wasn't used to it just now, but now I know. Damn, he was really a genius. He could infer many things from one instance. He didn't change for 3 hours just now. Was he playing with fried dough twists now? But Bai Shueli had to admit that he was really fucking awesome. Even her screams were filled with excitement. When Yi Mulin's secretary came over, she was also speechless. Her boss suddenly got married, and she didn't even prepare a wedding gift. Yi Mulin's shirt was stained with blood. She didn't know if it was his or Mrs. Ye's. Anyway, his strict appearance was a bit embarrassing. And the new Mrs. Yi was even worse. She only wore a bathrobe and her face was pale. The makeup on her face was messy and her neck was full of kiss marks. It seemed that her boss had special feelings for that piece of land. When the little secretary was trembling, Bai Shuili shouted. I want a divorce. Yi Mulin didn't care. You have been in the R period these days.
We have done it 4 times.
You might be pregnant with my child now. How can you get a divorce? Besides, the Yi family and the Bai family can't afford to lose face like this. I don't care. I want Mubai back. Bai Shuili was not afraid of anything. To some extent, she was the same as Lin Cece in the past. She could get anything she wanted. Yi Mulin looked at her as if he was looking at a willful child. We have slept together. Do you think Mubai will still want you? Bai Shuili stared at him. Suddenly, there was a touch of moisture in her eyes. The moisture slowly gathered. Tears fell down one by one. She didn't make a scene anymore. She just looked at him, the man who had just taken her violently. Really, this man was too strong. All her resistance and willfulness were not worth mentioning in front of him. He wouldn't be soft-hearted to her. When she was in pain, he only cared about his own enjoyment. She sneered in her heart. Don't think that she didn't know that he was actually enjoying it. This man pretended to be dignified even if he was enjoying it. Bai Shuili stared at him and said softly, Yi Mulin, you bullied me. He was so much older than her. He was big and strong and forced her. She hated him to death. She hated him to death. To hell with the marital agreement. This devil wanted to control her. There was no love between them. Everything he did was for the Yi family, for Yi Mubai. He took her in the same way he did his cock. Yi Mulin stared at her and frowned. Stop fooling around. I have to go to America tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Didn't you say I was going to marry you? Is there no honeymoon? Bai Shuili picked up a table lamp and threw it at him. You're a bastard. What do you think I am? I don't want to marry you. The moment you leave, I'll drug your baby brother and climb into his bed. Yi Mulin crossed his arms in front of him and stared at her. Are you angry because you didn't have a honeymoon? I'm angry about marrying an old man like you. Bai Shuili was furious. I won't sign your so-called marital agreement. As long as you don't divorce me, I'll spend all your money and make you wear a green hat. Chapter 32:30. His secretary looked at his boss with a look of surprise, as if the door to a new world had been opened. Such a shameless man was her boss. Was it the serious boss who never cracked a joke? Didn't the boss not like women? But why does it look like he's making love and a machine? Yi Mulin looked at his secretary. Go out first. Get the driver to pick me up at 6. The secretary gulped and left. She wondered if her boss was going to keep their wedding night until dawn. She had to admit that she knew the truth. After the secretary left, Yi Mulin looked at his new wife. Are you going to America with me or staying in B City? Is there a difference? Bai Shuili was on guard. There isn't much of a difference, Yi Mulin said calmly. Bai Shuili stepped back. Then I choose to stay in B City. He looked at her. Okay. Then he carried her to the bedroom and threw her on the bed. She screamed. What do you want to do? Wasn't this his first time? Was an old man on his first time so scary? This time, Yi Mulin took off his clothes one by one and threw them away. As he got fewer and fewer pieces of clothing, his figure could be seen clearly. It was the body of a supermodel. It was so pleasing to the eye that it made people's noses bleed. But that didn't stop her from hating him. Since you chose to stay in B City, I have to promise that you will behave yourself when I'm not around, Yi Mulin said expressionlessly. Then he said 10,000 words shyly. Bai Shuili was stunned. He got what he wanted. She widened her eyes and hit him with all her might. Bastard, it's my first time. Was he addicted to raping her? She was really in pain. She cried uncontrollably and slowly lost the strength to struggle. She just laid her face on the pillow and cried silently. She looked a little fragile. Yi Mulin kissed her face. Good girl. He pushed even harder and did it until 5 in the morning. Bai Shuili had reason to think that if he continued, he would rape a corpse. She would be the corpse. Yi Mulin was too cruel. He was not human at all. He didn't treat her as a woman at all. He treated her as a machine like him. When he left her body, she used her last bit of strength and said weakly, I must divorce you. Yi Mulin was getting dressed and frowned when he heard what she said. Why do you still want a divorce? Am I not able to satisfy you? Fuck him. Did he think that marriage only needed to feel good and that there was no love or liking? Bai Shuali was so tortured by him that she didn't want to talk anymore. She turned around and ignored him. She flipped over, and he could clearly see the finger marks and kiss marks on her back. Yi Mulin put on his clothes, walked over, and sat down. He gently touched her back with his fingers. Does it hurt? That shouldn't be the case. He had known Bai Shuali for a long time. She was thick-skinned and very good at fighting. How could she be so weak after one night with him? He couldn't understand. Bai Shuali suddenly turned around, her eyes red. Get lost. He had taken her the first time, the second time, the third time, so many times, and he had the nerve to ask. He did not seem to be made of flesh there. It was iron. She stared at him, her eyes red, and finally buried her face in the pillow. Chapter 30-31.
Fuck.
He still had the cheek to complain? Why didn't he complain when he was on top of her the whole night? He complained when he got off the bed and pulled up his pants. Bai Shuali threw a pillow at him. She was already planning to find a gigolo to make him a cuckold the moment he left. She hated him. She hated him a lot. She hated him to death. If it wasn't for him, she would have been with Mu Bai last night. She would have worn those sexy pajamas and Mu Bai would have been tempted. She would have lived with Mu Bai like a princess and a prince. She wouldn't have been with this egomaniac. He wasn't her ideal person at all. He was arrogant, his entire body was hard, and he was especially rough and not gentle. He didn't have any expression when he did it. She was not happy at all. Other than pain, there was more pain. Also, he had so many flaws that she couldn't even count them. The more Bai Shuali thought about it, the sadder she felt. She felt that she had raped Yi Mulin in her past life. That was why he was treating her like this. Her first time was gone just like that. She started to cry. It wasn't a soft cry, but a loud one. She didn't like him anyway, and didn't need to act like a lady. It would be best if he hated her now and divorced her immediately. Thus, she cried even harder. Her tears and snot were all over the place. Actually, Yi Mulin should have left, but his new wife was lying on the ground, crying like she was at a crime scene. How could he leave? Bai Shuali cried while paying attention to the movements around her. She realized that he actually didn't leave. She wailed, Go away, I want to find a gigolo. His face was green as he leaned over to look at her messy face. Look at you now. No matter how much money you give, the gigolo might not be willing. I'm willing.
You don't have to care about me.
She buried her face in the pillow and sobbed. She felt that she couldn't live anymore. The sky was falling. Yi Mulin looked at her helplessly and impatiently. In his life, women were troublesome. The one in front of him was simply a lowly creature. In his eyes, everything about her was fake. But she was tested. She was real. And the halo behind her was someone else's. It was fake. A fake that couldn't be any more fake. She was a useless worm. Other than providing a path and a purple palace to conceive a child, she had no use at all. Moreover, this woman kept saying that she wanted to make him a cuckold. Yi Mulin had a headache. He rubbed his forehead and looked at the woman on the bed. He was the one who bullied her so badly. Initially, he thought that with his good performance, a slutty woman like her would be happy to cater to him. However, after an entire night, other than screaming, she didn't even say a word of praise. He lowered his head and looked at himself. Or was he not good in that aspect? Yi Mulin pondered for a moment. In order to prevent himself from being cuckolded in a few days, he made a decision. Bring her to America. But he had to convince her. Lawyer Ye's way of persuading people was also very unique. He picked her up and went to the bathroom to wash her ghost-like face with water. Bai Shuali gulped down a large mouthful of cold water and shouted desperately, You need to use makeup remover. Yi Mulin, you bastard. Yi Mulin frowned. Won't the facial cleanser work? He was definitely a straight man. Bai Shuali wanted to fuck his ancestors. She wiped her face and said, No need for that. It won't wash off. You go out, and I'll wash it myself. He seemed to doubt her words and even warned, if you dare to run away, I'll catch you, you'll kill me, right? She slammed the bathroom door shut. She wanted to fuck him to death right now. Chapter 30-32. Yi Mulin rubbed his nose and coughed softly. Maybe yes. Bai Shueli roared angrily. Go to hell. Yi Mulin raised his hand to look at the time. He could still give her half an hour at most. During this time, he made himself a cup of coffee and sipped it as he looked around the suite. To be honest, he hadn't taken a good look since he came in. It was ordered by Bai Shueli for his and Mubai's wedding. He seemed to have thought of something and walked to the changing room to open it. Sure enough, there were a few interesting outfits hanging inside. A set of sexy white spaghetti straps and a set of black. Yi Mulin took down the black straps and was sure that it was a set of lingerie. Tai play. He curled his lips. What a hardcore taste. At this moment, a fair hand snatched the things from his hands. How can you go through my things? He raised his eyebrows and looked at his new wife. She had washed up simply, and there were no weird things on her face. She looked much more pleasing to the eye. Her facial features were still European, but her skin was very fair. One look, and he could tell that she had been pampered for a long time. What are you looking at? I've never seen it before. Bai Shueli threw the two clothes into the trash can. Yi Mulin crossed his arms in front of him. If you didn't buy it, why did you throw it away? How could he not know that she had prepared it for Mubai? If it was another man, she wouldn't be interested in wearing it. Actually, Yi Mulin didn't look forward to it. He was a very practical man. To him, women were just taking off their clothes to give him a visual impact. As for those fancy clothes, he didn't appreciate them, nor was he passionate about them. But he didn't expect that one day, he would really like his wife to wear these clothes to seduce him. He would become a hardcore person. However, he didn't really appreciate it now. He was just making things difficult for her. Bai Shueli smiled coldly. It's a waste for an old man like you to wear it. With that, she took off her bathrobe and got ready to change. She didn't have any intention of avoiding him since they had slept together. Yi Mulin leaned against the door and looked at her naked body. She looked fair and translucent under the faint morning light. She had the slender figure of the East and the plump figure of the West. She was very pleasing to the eye. The eldest brother of the Yi family had never had a woman, but there were many women who threw themselves into his arms. Some of them were even celebrity models, but none of them could compare to the body in front of him. He had held it with his own hands and even slept with it. His gaze was still absent-minded, because he had vented many times. So even though he found it pleasing to the eye, he did not have the impatience of an inexperienced youth. Bai Shueli cursed in her heart. She changed her clothes and walked towards the door. Yi Mulin, goodbye. No, it would be best if they never met again. My lawyer will send you the divorce papers. As soon as she opened the door, a large bouquet of red roses appeared in front of her. The face of a young man who was delivering the flowers appeared behind her. Are you Miss Bai? These are your roses. Bai Shueli took the roses and threw them on the ground. I don't need them anymore. What a fucking rose. Just as she finished throwing a tantrum, a strong hand grabbed her wrist, and then a deep voice rang in her ears. Apologize to him. Chapter 32-33. Divorce is divorce and respect is respect. They are two different things. Yi Mulin's voice was much stricter. Bai Shueli looked at him blankly, and her eyes became misty. Yi, don't think that I'm afraid of you. You slept with me for nothing. You should be thankful that I didn't sue you. Let me tell you, if you pester me again, I'll sue you for rape. Husband and wife had sex, and you want to sue me? Are you sure? He sneered as if he was looking at a child who didn't know anything. Bai Shueli's mouth was moving up and down violently. She glared at him. Yi Mulin, don't think that I don't know about marital rape just because you're the best lawyer. Where's the evidence? He pulled her closer with one hand and trapped her in his embrace. Did I hurt you or something? Aren't you feeling quite comfortable? He paused. On the contrary, There is evidence of your rape behind my back. Why don't I sue you for rape? Let's see who has a better chance of winning, Bai Shueli used her bag to hit him. Yi Mulin, are you even a man? You didn't even fucking greet me before you barged in. It hurts so much, and you still have the cheek to say that I raped you? You're just shameless, pretending to be a hypocrite all day long. The man who delivered the flowers was stunned. It was so exciting this early in the morning. Her handbag had left 2 deep scratches on his face, and it wasn't shallow at all. Yi Mulin snatched her bag and threw it into the trash can. Bai Shueli screamed, Yi Mulin, you bastard. Don't you know that this is a limited edition from Hermes? You can't buy it even if you have money. She rushed over, but her pride didn't allow her to pick up the things in the trash, even if it was clean. She turned around again, and her eyes were burning with anger. She clenched her fists. I hate you. Apologize. He pulled her over and held her in his arms. He made her face the man. I'll say it one last time. Apologize. The man was stunned and waved his hand. No need, no need. I just need an autograph to prove that I received it. Yi Mulin sneered. She ordered the flowers for herself. She doesn't need to sign. Also, apologize. I don't want that. Bai Shueli was stubborn. Why should I apologize to someone who sent me flowers? Let him eat shit. My surname is Bai and my father is, but you don't have your dad. You're just a piece of shit. Yi Mulin mocked. Bai Shueli almost went crazy. She screamed, Yi Mulin, what are you saying? You're a piece of shit. Didn't you say that he ate shit? If you don't apologize, I'll let him kiss you. Do you want it? He twisted her arm, forcefully and roughly. Bai Shueli screamed again, Yi Mulin, I want to divorce you. Yi Mulin grabbed her and said to the delivery boy, come and eat shit. The young man who delivered the flowers was completely dumbfounded. This man is so strong. At this moment, not only did he not feel humiliated, but he also felt extremely satisfied. Just as he was hesitating, Bai Shueli screamed, don't come over, I apologize. Say sorry, you're wrong. Yi Mulin looked at her. Bai Shueli's eyes were full of tears. She stared at the delivery boy. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Say that you shouldn't let him eat shit. Yi Mulin's voice was still cold. Bai Shueli suppressed her anger. I shouldn't let you eat shit. Chapter 32-34. After she said that, Yi Mulin nodded with satisfaction and said gently to the man who sent the flowers, okay, you can go now. The young man who sent the flowers thanked him and ran away. Yi Mulin turned around and looked at his new wife. She looked like she was about to explode. He let go of her and said, don't think about the divorce. I can't afford to lose my face. There's one more thing I want to tell you. Dress conservatively in the future. Don't show anything that shouldn't be exposed, understand? As he said that, he looked in the direction of the trash can and said, as for those immoral clothes, you can wear them at home, but if you wear them outside, then you will divorce me, right? Bai Shueli was exactly what he wanted. Yi Mulin sneered at her naivety and said, I will break your legs. His distinguished new wife was furious. Yi, do you know who I am? I will definitely know who you are when you marry me. Yi Mulin's voice was cold. If you marry me, I will fix all your shortcomings for you, so that you won't pollute the earth. Fuck. Bai Shueli scolded. Men like you who don't know how to be sweet and only like to rape are the real garbage of the earth. As soon as she finished speaking, she screamed, Yi Mulin, what do you want to do? Yi Mulin had already picked her up and walked outside. As he walked, he said in a deep voice, to the United States. I don't want to go to the United States with you. I don't want to go with an old man like you. She punched him desperately and bit him with her mouth, but it was useless. He still carried her into the elevator. When they reached the first floor, he stuffed her into the car and got on the private plane. The marriage farce between the Yi and Bai families was temporarily calmed down because of Yi Mulin's strength. Yi Mulin was very busy, so there was no honeymoon and no homecoming party. Bai Shueli's passport was all in his hands. When she went to the United States, she could only wait for him in the hotel. She had to reproduce day and night. She didn't even have a chance to seduce a man. As for the people involved in the fight in the hotel the day before, they were all sent to the hospital. The VIP ward of Xinyuan Hospital was specially designed to welcome these rich men. The most powerful and beastly doctor in Xinyuan Hospital, Qin Chen, was also waiting for them. Yi Mubai was fine. He had no grudge against Qin Chen, so his treatment was normal. However, Gu Zhe was different. He was no different from Lan Yu at that time. While enjoying Dr. Qin's wonderful medical skills, he also had to be criticized. Gu Zhe and Yi Mubai were both injured in different degrees. One of Gu Zhe had a broken rib, while Bai's leg was broken. Qin Chen brought 2 beautiful nurses to change Gu Zhe's dressing. His technique was very good. It was neither too light nor too heavy, just enough to make Gu Zhe die. How could Gu Zhe not know that this was Qin Chen's revenge? He gritted his teeth and asked, "Where's Cece?" Qin Chen chuckled. "She's your ex-wife. At Yi Mubai's place, you almost broke her leg. Of course, Cece has to accompany you. Or should she accompany you?" Qin Chen chuckled. "She is your ex-wife. You almost broke her leg at Yi Mubai's place. Of course, Cece has to accompany you. Or should she accompany you?" "She is my wife this month, right?" Qin Chen smiled.
Gu Zhe.
"Actually, if you hadn't schemed against Cece yesterday, you could have parted on good terms. But you shouldn't have schemed against her. If you love someone, do you have to scheme against them?" He just wanted Lin Cece to offend Bai Xueli. Then, she could only survive under his protection. But loving someone was not like that. If you loved someone, you should let that person fly higher. Even if you had to look up to her, you should be happy. Gu Zhe's love was too overbearing. Chapter 32-35. There was still sweat on his forehead from the pain, but he didn't feel anything from the pain. He only felt a little lonely. He was lonely without Lin Cece by his side. He said hoarsely, "Can she see me?" Qin Chen got up and stood there for a while. He seemed to be thinking about it and said, "I'll ask, but it's up to her whether she wants to see me or not." Then, she said something that made Gu Zhe's heart tighten. Yi Mubai ran away from the wedding for Cece, and Yi Mulin took over everything. From what I know, Yi Mulin and Bai Xueli must have really got married. Do you think Cece will be touched by Lao Bai? Gu Zhe looked at Qin Chen and asked slowly, "If it were you, would you choose Lao Bai or me?" "I choose Lan Yu." Qin Chen said coldly, "Neither of you is my cup of tea." Gu Zhe looked at him in disdain. "You'd just like to be gay with him." This couple really had a bad taste. Qin Chen paused and said, "If I were Cece, I would choose Lao Bai." Gu Zhe's heart was cold. He lay on the hospital bed alone, wondering if Lin Cece was really with Lao Bai, and if she was lying on the same bed with him. Just thinking about it made his broken rib hurt even more. At night, his heart was even colder. He didn't know where she was now, but he guessed that she was with Lao Bai. He felt a little proud, but he couldn't stand it anymore and took the phone. He held it in his hand for a long time before he finally dialed her number. It rang 4 or 5 times before he picked it up. It was her soft voice, Gu Zhe's. When Gu Zhe heard her voice, his throat felt as if it was blocked. He thought of what Qin Chen had said. He said that if he didn't scheme, they would part ways. But that wasn't what he wanted. He wanted her to live with him forever. He held his breath, feeling nervous like he had never felt before. "I don't have anyone to take care of me. I want to drink water. Can you come over?" Lin Cece was silent for a moment, but she still agreed. "Wait a moment." Thus, Gu Zhe was overjoyed, like a miserable young man waiting for the girl in his heart. He fidgeted and lay down, unable to find the most elegant posture. Lin Cece arrived 5 minutes later. She was wearing a wool skirt and a wool shawl. She pushed the door open and quietly poured a glass of water. She placed it in front of Gu Zhe's bed. "Didn't you want to drink water?" Gu Zhe leaned against the wall and looked at her with a burning gaze. "Where's Lao Bai?"
Yes.
Lin Cece smiled faintly. "He's better at acting coquettishly than you." Gu Zhe's mind was in a mess. He couldn't imagine Lao Bai acting like a spoiled child. Did he lean on her shoulder and ask her to feed him? He thought about it and hesitated whether he should do the same. Lin Cece said again, "If there's nothing else, I'll leave first. There's no nurse there. I have to take care of him." Just as she was about to leave, Guze reached out and grabbed her wrist. He said in a low voice, "Don't go." He grabbed her arm. Lin Cece wanted to step back, but he held her firmly. She had no choice but to say, "Guze, don't do this." He looked at her and asked softly, "Have you made your choice? Do you choose to be with Lao Bai?" She shook her head blankly. Then, she looked at his gaze and suddenly nodded.
Yes.
"I will be with him." She lied to him. If it made it easy for him to let go. Guze gently closed his eyes. "I don't believe you. It's true." Her voice was low.
Guze, I'm sorry.
"We really can't go back." She struggled to break free from his hand, bit by bit, as if she was trying to break free from his life. Chapter 32-36. Guze loosened his grip, as if he was about to let go of her, but he quickly tightened it again. Not only did he tighten his grip, but he also pulled her into his arms. When she pressed against his ribs, Guze cursed, but he didn't let go of her. Instead, he held her tightly. Their eyes met, and he stared into her eyes. "Tell me you're lying to me." Lin Cece's face was forced to be buried in his neck, and her voice was a bit moist. "Guze, your injury will worsen. If you don't love me, why do you care about my injury?" he said almost willfully. Then, he pinched her chin and kissed her forcefully. Lin Cece wanted to retreat, but he pressed her head with another hand. This way, her body pressed against him even harder, and Lin Cece could almost hear his broken rib breaking inch by inch. Her eyes widened, and she struggled desperately, but every bit of her struggle made him hurt more. Guze didn't care at all, kissing her almost crazily. He even ignored his rib injury and pressed her down, eager to possess her and prove that she was still his. The consequences were serious. Before he could succeed, his head accidentally hit the nurse's bell, and several nurses came together. The scene was chaotic. Lin Cece's clothes were disheveled, and Guze's rib was broken again. When Chen rushed over from home, she wanted to saw off Guze's rib. He was already injured like this, but he was still thinking about XXOO. How big of a heart did he have? It took Chen 2 hours to set Guze's rib. When she came out of the surgery, she saw Lin Cece standing at the door of the operating room. She took off her mask and walked over, smiling. "Are you okay?" Lin Cece looked at Chen and suddenly hugged her. They hadn't hugged like this in a long time, and it had been a long time since they were alone like this. Chen was stunned for a moment, then she lowered her head and held Lin Cece in her arms. Her small one was in her arms. Just like in the past, just like in New York, they were leaning on each other. Lin Cece rested her face on Chen shoulder and said softly, "Sister Chen, you remember, don't you?" Chen didn't answer her directly. Instead, he hugged her tightly. "Cece, that's all in the past." She turned back and cupped her little face. "Everything will be fine." Lin Cece looked at Chen and smiled with tears in her eyes. She nodded her head vigorously. She looked at the person whom she used to really like hug her once again. She murmured, "What should I do, Sister Chen? I still like you a lot." Chen laughed. "It's very simple. I'll talk to Lanyu later and take you back as well. I'll take turns to pamper you too." Lin Cece rolled her eyes. "Forget it. I'll be killed by Lanyu." At this time, Lanyu was impatient from waiting in the parking lot. He came to find Chen and happened to hear it. He walked over with a smile and pinched Chen's face. "What? I can't satisfy you. You still want Cece to warm your bed?" He knew best about Cece's past when she liked Chen. Chen rolled her eyes at him. "Do you really think you're that great?" Lanyu pulled her into his arms and looked at Lin Cece. "Do you want to go back with us?" Lin Cece couldn't help but laugh. "I don't want to warm your bed." Lanyu coughed lightly. "You can warm my bed too." Chapter 30-37. In the parking lot, Lanyu asked his wife worriedly, "Are you really not going to care about Cece and Guze?"
How?
Chen rolled his eyes at him and fastened his seatbelt.
You should be able to tell who Cece likes.
It's impossible for her and Lao Bai to be together. I think Cece should be relieved that Bai Shuili is forcing her to marry him. Do you think she will be with Lao Bai again? Lanyu touched his chin and smiled. You're right. Chen sighed. But Guze is too scheming. He wants too much. Cece will be very tired if she is with him, and she may not be willing. Lanyu didn't say anything else and started the car to go home. In the hospital, Lin's Cece stood in the corridor. After a while, Guze was pushed out. The anesthesia was not completely over yet, but he was already a little conscious. Guze's parents were also there. When they saw Lin's Cece, the atmosphere was a little strange. Lin's Cece whispered, "Auntie, you're here. I'll leave first." Mama Gu stopped her and looked a little hesitant. "I have a few words to say to you." Lin's Cece pursed her lips and forced a smile.
Okay.
Mama Gu looked at Papa Gu. Papa Gu nodded. "I'll take care of Guze here." Guze's eyes opened a slit, as if he was about to wake up, but at the same time, he didn't seem to be awake. Lin's Cece looked at him for 2 seconds and went out with Guze's mother. After going out, Mama Gu didn't speak immediately. Instead, she sighed. "Cece, we didn't know that you and Guze were married before. When we found out, you were already divorced. Guze has let you down. We know that Guze really likes you now and wants to be with you again. But please understand our hearts as parents. We just want our children to live a good life." She wiped away her tears. "Old Gu and I used to have a daughter, but she was too stubborn and couldn't get over it. She jumped off a building and died. Now we only have Guze as our son. We've always hoped that he would marry Wennuan, but he lied and said that he had a vasectomy for you. Actually, Wennuan had no choice but to say that she was pregnant. We believed that she was a good girl and wouldn't mess around." Mama Gu looked at Lin's Cece and said slowly, "Cece, do you understand what I mean?" When Lin's Cece heard this, how could she not understand? She smiled faintly. "I understand that my past does not meet your standards for a daughter-in-law. But don't worry, there is no possibility between me and Guze. I will leave." Mama Gu was a little relieved. "I'm relieved that you said that, but I still feel a little sorry for you. After all, you have sacrificed a lot for Guze, especially that child." Lin's Cece felt as if a thorn had been stabbed in her heart. She smiled gently. "The child is not Guze's." Mama Gu felt uncomfortable and a little disappointed when she said that. She murmured, "It's not our Guze's." "Yes, it's not his." Lin's Cece lowered her eyes. "All right, that's it. I'm leaving." She pointed across the room. "My boyfriend still has that part. I'm going to take care of him." Mama Gu was even more disappointed. "You have a boyfriend again?" "Yes, his name is Yimubai. Guze knows him, and so do you, Auntie." Lin's Cece spoke very quickly, as if she was avoiding something. Then, she opened the door of the ward opposite and dashed in. Chapter 32-38. Lin's Cece leaned on Yimubai's shoulder and said softly, "No, I don't want to cry." Lao Bai didn't say anything and just hugged her. After a long time, she vaguely heard him say, "Cece, you still have me?" Lin's Cece was in a daze for a long time before she raised her eyes. There were tears in her eyes in the dark. Lao Bai, do you have to be so melodramatic? He kept looking at her. Then he smiled gently and said softly, "I'm just kidding." Then he reached out and turned on the light. The light in the ward suddenly became soft, and the tear stains on her face could be clearly seen. Yimubai sighed, "Cece, you are not such a fragile person." In fact, the only explanation was that she cared about that person, so she couldn't stand his mother's words. At that time, he wanted to rush out, pull her over, and say domineeringly, "This is my woman." Then he would kiss her. However, he didn't. He didn't dare. He was afraid that Cece would want to turn back. He was afraid that he would block the way for her to turn back. If that happened, He would never forgive himself. He was indulgent to her, he liked her, and he would rather see her happy. Even if she chose to be with someone else, it didn't matter. Lao Bai felt that he enjoyed the poignant beauty very much. He probably acted too much and was too immersed in the role. However, it was the first time that he cherished a girl so recklessly, so he didn't want to force her, and he didn't want to use anything to kidnap her. He looked at Lin Cece, and Lin Cece also looked at him. After a long time, she finally smiled very softly. Lao Bai, it's really good to have you here. He patted her head. I'm very good, but you still refuse me? Lin Cece helped him to lie down on the bed and sat on the edge of the bed with her chin in her hand. I saved you from the fire and water. Guze thought for a while, and then he suddenly smiled softly. You didn't expect it to develop like this, did you? Lin Cece lay on one of his injured legs, and her little chin rested there. Lao Bai's face was distorted with pain. He took back his words. She was not a little angel, she was a little devil. Lin Cece smiled and moved her chin away. She sighed softly. You didn't expect your brother to accept Bai Xueli, right? As she spoke, she raised her eyebrows. I heard that you and Bai Xueli used to like each other. How was it? How far did it go? Yi Mubai rolled her eyes and kicked her with her uninjured leg. Stop pulling nonsense. However, he couldn't help but sigh in a gloating tone. She's my sister-in-law now. Rather than saying that he had been in love with Bai Xueli, it was more like a nightmare. He really couldn't stand her temper, but he didn't know if his brother could. Lin Cece smiled. She lay next to Yi Mubai, and there was a touch of nostalgia in her eyes. Actually, I quite miss the past. At least I don't have any worries. Yi Mubai reached out and pulled her hair. You're worried about Guze now, aren't you? She did not deny it and remained silent. Cece, go back to City A. If it's difficult, then find a man to marry. There was a touch of sadness in his voice. Don't choose me. I don't want you to be lonely. Lin Cece was a little surprised. She looked at him and then laughed. Lao Bai, you're acting again. Don't be like this. I want to be with you when you're like this. Chapter 30-39. Lin Cece was still smiling. It was really relaxing when she was with Lao Bai. All her worries seemed to vanish into thin air when she was with him. However, they were still more of good friends than lovers. That night, she slept next to Lao Bai, fully clothed. Lao Bai told her many jokes, and she fell asleep while laughing. Yi Mubai reached out to turn off the lights, his gaze quietly landing on Lin Cece's face. Her little face was calm, but even though she was asleep, she still looked unhappy. He knew that it was because of Guze, a man who could make her heart beat faster, who could make her love and hate him at the same time. And he, Yi Mubai, was not that man. In her life, he was just like Lan Yu. And Guze had appeared at the right time. He reached out and gently brushed away the stray hair on her face. He smiled lightly and carefully leaned over to kiss her forehead. Good night, Cece. Lin Cece slept until noon the next day. She received a call from Guze. Lin Cece, where are you? She was sitting in Yi Mubai's ward, but Lao Bai was nowhere to be found. Lowering her eyes, she said softly, Guze, what I said yesterday was true. I'm with Lao Bai. As she said that, she took off her sweater, leaving only a white camisole on her body. She half crawled under the blanket. The door opened. Guze was standing at the door with bandages all over his face. He held onto his phone and looked at her, looking at her lying on Lao Bai's bed in only her underwear. Her long hair was scattered over her shoulders, and her eyes were a little red. Guze's eyes suddenly turned bloodshot. He was still holding onto his phone as he asked her, Are you sure? Lin Cece's phone slid down from her hand. She looked straight at him and said softly, I can't be more sure. Guze's body swayed. He held onto the door frame with one hand and smiled faintly. That smile was cold and self-deprecating. After a long time, he said, I'll transfer 80 million to your account. Lin Cece did not say anything. Guze stared at her and suddenly asked in a ruthless tone, Lin Cece. Are these days really nothing to you? Or are you blaming me for scheming against you? It has nothing to do with schemes. She looked at him and smiled. The past is the past, Guze. I said to be your wife for a month. When the time is up, everything will go back to square one. Guze looked at her as if she was a stranger. He still remembered that when they were in Sea City, she called him Guze. She said that she was very happy. Every time they made love, she would always call his name. Guze, 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 she said. Guze, how long have you been holding back for you to keep coming like this? But as she complained, she hugged him even tighter. That kind of burning emotion. Was it all an act? She had never forgiven him. Guze took a step back. The gauze around his mouth was already stained with blood, but he did not care. He still stared at her. He stared at her body lying on Laobai's bed. Did you guys do it last night? He asked her softly. At this moment, Guze's mother appeared behind him and held him up. She called out worriedly, Guze. Lin Cece looked at him, and her lips moved. Then she smiled. Yes, we did it. I said that I wanted to be with Laobai. Chapter 3240.
But she could only look at Guze.
There was nothing she could do. She couldn't do anything. There were too many things between them. The things he had done to her, her weakness, and his parents' disapproval. Lin Cece wasn't naive enough to think that they could be happy as long as she asked. So, she would rather give up. And she didn't plan to be with him for a long time. She didn't want to experience the feeling of loving someone so humbly anymore. Guze, who was at the door, took a few steps back. Mama Gu held him up and looked at Lin Cece with disgust. You don't like Guze and don't want to be with him. You don't have to make him angry. He was hurt by your man. With that, Guze's mother said with some dissatisfaction, this kind of woman can make a man abandon his wife at a wedding. What kind of good can she be? Guze, don't be so stubborn. Guze's eyes were still fixed on Lin Cece. He said to his mother softly, Mom, stop talking. Mama Gu wanted to say something, but she was worried about her son, so she said, Okay, I'll stop talking. Go back and ask Dr. Chin to come and take a look. How much turtle soup will he need to make up for this blood? Guze glanced at Lin Cece again. She leaned against the bed and looked at him. In the end, he looked away and returned to his ward. At this moment, Yi Mubai appeared out of nowhere and looked at Lin Cece quietly. Just say it if you can't bear to. I think Guze still wants you to return to his side. I don't know how much turtle soup will be needed to make up for that blood. Lin Cece smiled and said softly, You only know how to make me happy. General Bai sighed and said, I heard everything. But Cece, put on your clothes. If you had been willing to lie in my arms last night, we would have become a real husband and wife. We wouldn't have needed to lie. Lin Cece rolled her eyes at him, put on her sweater, and sat on the bed. General Bai sighed again and sat down. Those who don't know will think you are a patient. Let me lie down. After lying down, he complained again. Guze hit me so hard. Look at my leg. I won't be able to walk for at least a month. I might not even be able to have sex. Lin Cece looked at him and coughed lightly. Have you ever done it before? White shrugged. Cece, don't tell the truth. She laughed so hard that she almost choked. After a while, she leaned on his arm and said softly, Old Bai, you must find a very pure girl, really. Otherwise, you will be letting down this pure body of yours. Yi Mubai squinted at her. Are you mocking me? Is it that obvious? Lin Cece's smile became more obvious. I'm serious. He looked at her and suddenly pulled her into his arms, hugging her a little tightly. Lin Cece let him hug her. After a long time, she said in a low voice, Old Bai, if there is a next life, I will find you first. She didn't say anything else, so he didn't pursue the matter. He understood what she was thinking. It wasn't that she didn't work hard, wasn't firm, and wasn't persistent. It was that she couldn't let go of the past, whether it was the unbearable things or the time with Guze. In other words, the only person who could make Lin Cece let go of the past was Guze. No one else could. General Bai hugged her like an elder brother. Chapter 32-41. No need. Yimubai smiled. I know my brother's character best. He will definitely sleep that night. This is a lawyer's habit. Everything will be completely legalized. Lin Cece thought of Yi Mulin's poker face and felt that Bai Shueli was so miserable. She felt that the slap she gave her seemed to be a little light. She hugged her knees and leaned side by side with Lao Bai, talking. After a long time, Yimubai asked her in a low voice, Aren't you worried about Guze? Lin Cece paused for a moment and then said in a low voice, Sister Chinchin will tell me if there is anything. Yimubai didn't say anything more and just rubbed her hair. He didn't ask Lin Cece if she still loved Guze. He thought that she loved him, but she had too many scruples in her heart, and Guze still couldn't trust her. They were like parallel lines that would never meet. She stayed in Yimubai's ward for several days until Sunday afternoon, when Guze suddenly appeared. Unlike before, he was dressed neatly this time, with a black coat over a gray sweater. He didn't look like he had 2 broken ribs. Lin Cece was sitting in front of Yimubai's bed, holding an English book in her hand and reading it to Lao Bai. After Guze opened the door, his eyes dimmed for a moment. Do you have time? Lin Cece put down the book and turned to look at him. Guze smiled faintly. I want to talk to you alone. Is it convenient? He noticed that she was wearing home clothes. Although she didn't reveal anything, there was a kind of indescribable intimacy when she was alone with Yi Mulin. Therefore, he unconsciously took a step back. Lin Cece looked at Lao Bai. I'll go out for a while. Yi Mubai held her hand. Follow your heart. Lin Cece pursed her lips, withdrew her hand, walked out and closed the door. There is a small meeting room. Let's talk there. Guze nodded and walked over first. Lin Cece followed behind. Inside, Guze closed the door and silently took out a check from his pocket and placed it in her palm. Lin Cece shuddered and looked up. Guze, actually, there's no need for that. He smiled bitterly. You'll be my wife for a month. Isn't it just 80 million? The house payment will be transferred to the account. Lin Cece held the check in her hand. She didn't reject it pretentiously. Instead, she thanked him softly. As soon as she finished speaking, Guze hugged her. Her hands were clenched in midair. She wanted to struggle, but she gave up and let him hug her. Guze buried his face in her neck and said in a low voice, Lin Cece, you don't plan to be with Lao Bai, do you? She did not make a sound. He continued, if you were with him, you wouldn't need this 80 million. Lao Bai's net worth is billions. You wouldn't take my money. Lin Cece's hands fell down. After a long time, she whispered, Guze, this doesn't mean anything. He hugged her tighter and asked her again, you really don't want to turn back? Lin Cece, haven't you felt anything for me in the past month? Don't you feel like returning to the past at all? He let go of her a little and said softly, as long as you want, I can give you anything. As long as you turn back, I can give you anything. Lin Cece looked up and stared into his eyes. But if I have to give up my freedom and self-esteem, I'd rather not have anything. Guze, if you feel that you've lost out, I can stay with you for a few more days. Chapter 32-42. Lin Cece lowered her head and said again, Really, Guze, I can stay with you for a few more days. Guze looked at her and took a few steps back. He said coldly, Lin Cece, is this how you see yourself and us? He held her hand. Do you think I gave you 80 million to buy sex? Lin Cece smiled bitterly. Isn't it? President Gu bought me for a month. Did you just look at me and not sleep? Guze narrowed his eyes and stared at her. After a long time he sneered, Lin Cece, you're really good. He took 2 steps back. Didn't you say you would stay with me for 2 more days? No need, just once now. I'm going to be discharged in a while. It's only an hour. If you're willing, go to my ward. With that, he turned around and left. Lin Cece was still standing there. After a long time, She walked to his ward quietly. He closed the door and stood at the window of the ward. His voice was hoarse and low. "Take off your clothes?" Lin Cece's back was against the door. She pursed her lips and looked at him helplessly. Then she began to take off her clothes one by one. She dropped them on the ground one by one. In the end, there was nothing left. The cool air made her pores tremble slightly. She was a little cold and hugged herself. "Guze, is this okay?" Guze turned his head and looked at her with reddened eyes. After a long time, he said hoarsely, "Lin Cece, I really want to strangle you." She didn't say anything. She leaned against the door and didn't move at all. It was as if she was waiting for him to taste her. Guze really came over. He hugged her, kissed her, and rubbed her angrily. But in the end, he didn't take her. Letting go of her body, he said in a sad voice, "Lin Cece, you should go." She lowered her head and said yes. Guze looked at her. He wanted to hug her so much in the past, and now he wanted to kill her. She really knew how to escape unscathed and how to make him let her go. When she picked up her clothes and put them on with trembling hands, he suddenly asked softly, "Lin Cece, have you really never thought of turning back this month? Have you never thought of living with me?" She glanced at him and said very softly, "No, not even once." He closed his eyes slightly, and his voice was almost a sigh. Lin Cece bit her lip. "Yes, not even once." Guze took a few steps back and walked towards the window. He lit a cigarette and said indifferently, "Go. You can continue to live in the house. I won't move over. Just take it as a gift from me." "No need." Lin Cece's voice was a little choked. "And thank you, President Gu." She left, took $80 million and took away his heart. Guze felt that Lin Cece's heart had been eaten by a dog for her to leave without a conscience. Later, when he visited the villa, she did not come back to live there. Everything had been moved away. There were only some daily necessities he had bought that day, and a box of t-shirts he had bought. He stood in the bedroom and looked at it in his hand for a long time. In the end, he threw it into the trash can. He knew that Lin Cece wasn't with Yi Mubai. That day at the hospital, she probably put on a show for him. For some reason, Guze wanted to believe that was the case. He went to work and got off work every day. He didn't have time to have a girlfriend. In fact, it wasn't that he didn't have time, he just didn't want to. Chapter 32-43. Perhaps in his heart, there would only be one candidate for his wife. But she didn't want him. That was what Guze was thinking when he was going on a blind date with a pretty good woman. He couldn't smoke in the elegant restaurant, so he leaned back in his chair lazily and played with his lighter. The pretty woman was an artist who had won several awards, but Guze heard that she had bought it with money. However, regardless of whether she had bought it or not, the woman in front of him was very good-looking, and her business was doing well. However, he just couldn't get interested. He just couldn't hold such a good woman in his arms. The woman was talking, and he looked around in boredom. Suddenly, his gaze was attracted by a certain place. It was Lin Cece. It was early autumn, and she was wearing a black suit. Her long black hair was slightly curled, and she had a black hairpin on her forehead. She looked exquisite and capable. She was sitting with a very decent man, and they seemed to be discussing something. Guze's eyes fell on her face, and he looked at her quietly. The woman saw that he was a bit distracted, so she couldn't help calling him, "Guze?" Guze came back to himself and smiled, "Go on." But after a while, he was distracted again and looked at Lin Cece. Perhaps it was because his gaze was too intense, but Lin Cece also noticed him. She turned her head, and her gaze fell on his face. She smiled shyly. Guze made up his mind and said to the woman, "Let's go again next time. I have a friend who's going to say hi." The woman probably hadn't expected him to be so rude, so she quickly said, "I can go with you." "It's a female friend." Guze gave her a comforting smile. The woman didn't say anything because she knew that a man like Guze needed a well-behaved woman. If she disobeyed him, there wouldn't be a next time. However, she didn't know that the women who went on blind dates with Guze wouldn't have a next time. After the woman left, Guze was still sitting there, looking at Lin Cece. She understood what he meant, so when she finished talking with him, she walked over, put her briefcase aside, and sat down. Blind date? Guze didn't deny it. What about you? I'm just trying to make a living. Lin Cece smiled lightly. You don't mind treating me to some dessert, do you? Guze smiled and waved to the waiter to bring one over. His eyes fell on her face again.
What are you doing now?
Without waiting for her to answer, he immediately asked, I heard from the secretary that you donated the 80 million yuan to the children's fund. The waiter brought the desserts over. Lin Cece lowered her head and scooped a small spoonful. Then she smiled and said, That's right. I'm showing my love and also buying some peace of mind. Guze looked at her little face and then thought of their child. He whispered, Cece, I'm very sorry about that child. You didn't know it back then. Lin Cece smiled faintly. We were not fated to be together. After saying that, she pursed her lips and didn't want to talk about it anymore. You haven't told me what you're doing now, Guze said softly. Lin Cece replied softly, I'm doing software. It's kind of my old profession. Don't ask me why I'm not in the entertainment industry anymore. She looked up. Bai Shuili is always looking for trouble with me. Do you think I can survive? Guze smiled. Isn't it good? This profession is better than the entertainment industry. I don't have to drink with people every day. Chapter 32-44. Guze looked at her and suddenly said, If it's tough and you need someone to take care of you, Lin Cece, will you consider me? Lin Cece looked at him and said in a very low voice, Are you sure? Guze pursed his lips and smiled faintly. Lin Cece also smiled and raised her eyebrows. What do you want me to be? Is it an innocent woman, or is it your lover, or is it your wife? Guze lit a cigarette and looked at her quietly. It depends on what you think. At this moment, the waiter immediately came over and said awkwardly, Mr. Gu, this is a non-smoking area. Guze glanced at him, put out the cigarette and looked at Lin Cece. I'll send you. Lin Cece looked down and said, I'll take a taxi myself. Guze didn't say anything else. He held her hand and walked out. Guze. Lin Cece called his name, but he held her hand and walked out. When they reached the parking lot, Guze opened the car door and sent her into the car. He started the car and looked at her sideways. Are you still living in that apartment? Lin Cece looked at him. Have you investigated me? Guze smiled and didn't answer. He started the car and continued driving until they reached her apartment. He stopped the car and looked at her. Aren't you going to invite me upstairs for a glass of water? Lin Cece looked at him for a long time and sighed. Guze, it's really impossible for us. Guze smiled. At least let me see how you're doing. He looked up. Which floor? This apartment was a 6-story bungalow. It was in a good location, and it was not too old. It was one of the better houses in B City, and Lin Cece could afford it. Lin Cece looked at him, pursed her lips, and followed him in. 5th floor. Lin Cece's voice was very soft. I don't have coffee there. Guze said calmly. Plain water is fine. Lin Cece looked at him and pressed the elevator button. Guze smiled and said nothing. When they reached her apartment, she closed the door. The place is a little small. Take a seat. I'll get you some water. As soon as she finished speaking, he grabbed her hand and her body was in his embrace. Without a word, he lowered his head and kissed her. The kind of deep, deep kiss, as if he could kiss the depths of her soul. Lin Cece almost couldn't stand still and stumbled as he pressed her onto the sofa. When he was done kissing her, Lin Cece gasped and asked, What do you want? Guze looks down at her. Lin Cece, if I say to be my wife, are you willing? Lin Cece looked down. I said it's impossible between us. Why is it impossible? You're not with Lao Bai. He stared into her eyes, wanting an answer. Lin Cece's voice was very soft. Because there is no more love, Guze. Many things have worn away the love between us. I no longer have the strength to love another person. Guze stared at her. Lin Cece pursed her lips. I'm very good now. It's really good to be alone. Guzé, please let me go, really. Guzé's gaze was deep. Lin Cece, have you thought it through? Now that there is no love, we can still continue. We still have a lifetime to love each other. If you're not sure, then let me tell you, I love you. She was stunned and looked at him blankly. Chapter 32:45. This was a little different from what she had expected. After they left the hospital, he should have hated her. Could it be that after knowing that she wasn't with Lao Bai, he changed his mind and wanted to be with her again? This wasn't the Guzé she knew. However, he looked so serious. When he said that he would take care of her, she was really moved and wavered. Lin Cece pursed her lips. Just as she was about to speak, the apartment door opened and Yimubai's voice came from outside. Cece, you're back. I'm so tired. I'll take a shower first. Do you want to give me a massage? Lin Cece closed her eyes. Lao Bai. Why was he here at this time? Although he would shamelessly come over to stay for a couple of days, didn't he just leave a few days ago? The atmosphere was a little strange. She looked up at Guzé, and Guzé looked at Yimubai at the door. Yimubai looked at them, confused. However, he still took off his coat and walked in. Guzé is here. He stood next to Guzé. What's going on between you and Cece? Guzé slowly let go of Lin Cece and stood face to face with Yimubai. The two men sized each other up. Lin Cece was still lying on the sofa, looking at them with her chest heaving up and down. After a long while, Guzé said softly, Lin Cece, I was thinking too highly of myself. His gaze paused on her face, then he took his coat and walked out. Lin Cece was lying on the sofa, but she still looked at his back. However, he didn't turn back. Lao Bai stood quietly and asked softly, Did I come at the wrong time? Lin Cece shook her head and looked at Lao Bai. She sat up weakly. You came at the right time. I didn't know how to reject you. Lao Bai looked at her. Are you going to reject me?
No.
Lin Cece smiled faintly. Don't joke around. Don't you want to take a shower? Soon, but you're not allowed to wear my slippers when you come out. What kind of hobby did an old man like to squeeze her fluffy, white slippers? Did he still have a young girl's heart? Yimubai wanted to say something but hesitated. In the end, he sighed softly. Cece, why don't we just make do with it? She glared at him. Are you itching for a beating again? Hurry up and take a bath, or I'll throw you out. You're homeless now, and I'm the only one who can take you in. The girls in 5-star hotels are much cuter than you. Maybe if I coax them a little, I'll be able to find one to warm my bed. General Bai snorted softly and obediently went to take a shower. Lin Cece looked in White's direction and was a little stunned. She didn't know if she would regret not explaining to Guzé today and not choosing Guzé, but at this moment, she didn't regret it. The conflict between him and her wouldn't disappear after a few months. She walked to the balcony, where she could see the place where Guzé parked his car. She opened the blinds a little and saw Guzé standing beside the car. He seemed to be smoking, but after lighting the cigarette, he put it out. Then, he took out another cigarette and lit it up. He smoked over and over again, and his expression didn't look good. Lin Cece looked at him quietly and pursed her lips. At this moment, Guzé's gaze turned to her side, and it was as if he had seen her. Actually, people outside couldn't see what was inside, but Lin Cece still felt a little guilty, so she immediately closed the blinds. She turned around and saw Lao Bai standing there, looking at her thoughtfully. Chapter 32:46. Lao Bai smiled and walked over to open the blinds. Guzé is here? Lin Cece's eyebrows twitched. What did you say? I lied to you. Lao Bai smiled slightly. Lin Cece ran over and hit him hard. Lao Bai, you're too despicable. He let her hit him and said softly, How can I force out your true feelings if I'm not despicable? Lin Cece suddenly withdrew her hand and looked at Lao Bai. After a while, she looked away. I told you that we have to start over. Lao Bai sighed. Cece, didn't you mean anything other than 80 million in the 1-month agreement between you and Guze? Lin Cece took a step back and wanted to escape, but Lao Bai grabbed her hand and didn't allow her to escape. He just gently pulled her into his arms. Perhaps other men and women hugged each other affectionately, but Lao Bai and Lin Cece didn't. She lay in his arms, feeling embarrassed as if she had been seen through. Yimubai's voice was a bit depressed. Cece, don't you have any thoughts of reminiscing and reliving the past? Lin Cece's fingers tugged at the clothes on his shoulder, and she bit her lip. Lao Bai stopped talking. Lao Bai turned his face away and looked at her. Others couldn't see it, but only he could see that Cece had never walked out of it. Whether it was love or hate for Guze, if it hadn't been for that child, they might have gotten over it. But creating a child was something a woman couldn't get over for the rest of her life. Lao Bai knew that he had lost to that child. He didn't want to force her, but she couldn't walk out of it. How could they talk about a future? Some thorns hurt even when he looked at them, and he couldn't help but want to pick them out for her. She was in pain now, but fortunately, he was with her. Cece, if you can't forget, go find him. Lao Bai's voice was low and hoarse. Be brave and face your heart, okay? Lin Cece leaned her face on his shoulder and shook her head. Then she put her arms around his neck, as if she had made up her mind about something. She leaned over and kissed Yimubei. His body froze. He didn't expect her to be like this. Lin Cece's voice whispered softly beside his lips. Old Bai, will you reject me? At this moment, his body sat on the sofa, and she sat in his arms. She took off her coat, revealing a very thin dress underneath. She held him, and he was a normal man, and soon his body surrendered. Cece. Yimubai's lips moved to the back of her ear.
So, what if we have sex?
If you want to be with me, think about it carefully, and we can do it now. If I'm just a tool for you to forget about Guze, then we can still be very good friends, friends who can sleep on the same bed without anything happening. Lin Cece didn't care. She seemed to have made up her mind and moved over to block his lips. Yimubai sighed softly. She was being willful, because he doted on her and liked her. In fact, he was also a normal man. How could he not have emotions? She was simply playing with fire. As long as he didn't control them, it would be real. But what about in the future? After they were done, she still couldn't forget about Guze. Lao Bai was very clear about this. He also knew that to walk into a woman's heart, he had to walk into her why. But he liked Cece, and he didn't dare to gamble that they would really have a future after doing it. He was afraid that Cece would regret it. Once they did it, they would have crossed the bottom line, and there would be no turning back. Chapter 30-47. Lin Cece kissed Lao Bai indiscriminately. Lao Bai endured it but did not respond. After a while, he chuckled softly and lay flat on the bed. He looked down at her and said gently, Cece, if you keep kissing me like this, I might not be able to get it up for the rest of my life. How could he not know that she was just a little fragile now? She kissed him, but only kissed him and kissed him, nothing else. If she really wanted to have sex with him, he wouldn't be able to control himself. He sighed and reached out to stroke her slightly curly hair. She was like a child now, venting all the fear, nervousness, and hurt in her heart. Slowly, Lin Cece stopped kissing him and just hugged him. She hugged him gently and then cried. She leaned over his shoulder and whispered, I'm sorry. Yimubai smiled gently and reached out to wipe her tears. He whispered, what do you have to be sorry for? We just didn't fall in love. If you want to say sorry, Cece, I'm sorry. I came late. Actually, it was him who had been watching her from behind, hesitating. If he had confessed to her earlier and told her that he liked her, then she wouldn't have liked Chin. Then there wouldn't have been any hurt later, and she wouldn't have met Guze. Even if they had met, she and Guze would have been complete strangers. But life was so strange. One wrong step, and it would continue to be wrong. He was hugging her now, but nothing could really happen. If it did happen, it would be the biggest hurt to her. Yimubai's heart was a little moved. He reached out and hugged her, burying his face in her neck. He finally said, "Cece, I'm sorry." She didn't understand, but that was enough. As long as he knew. They hugged for a long time like friends, but more like family. He asked her if one day they could hug and have sex naturally. She said, "If that's the case, Lao Bai, we'll get married." Lao Bai only stayed here for 2 days. He was busy during the day and could only see her at night. Later, he moved back to the main residence of the Yi family. It was the Yi family's head's idea because it was Yimubai's mother's 60th birthday. Therefore, no matter how busy his eldest and youngest sons were, they had to go home early. As soon as Yimubai's car arrived at the parking lot, Bai Shuali ran out of the living room and leaned against the door of his car. Yimubai sat in the car for a long time, then opened the door with a sigh. He couldn't avoid it either way. As soon as he opened the door, he received 2 slaps on his face. "Yimubai, you bastard. After hiding for a few months, you finally showed up." Yimubai reached out his hand and touched his face. Seeing that Bai Shuali had lost a lot of weight, his heart ached. How did that big brother of his torment every night? Bai Shuali used to be so well-nourished, but now she was really haggard. "So," Yimubai coughed lightly and said in a caring tone, "Surely, is my brother easy to get along with?" "Get along my ass." Bai Shuali glared at him. The anger in her heart from hitting him just now had dissipated a little. At this moment, she felt a little wronged again. She had always been willful. She had hugged Yimubai in the Yi family's mansion. Yimubai felt helpless. He wanted to push her away, but she cried fiercely. It was the kind that cried fiercely, like a wronged child. In addition, she had lost a lot of weight. Yimubai always had some feelings for her. They grew up together, so he couldn't bear to push her away. But when he looked up, he saw his big brother standing on the balcony on the 2nd floor, holding a cigarette in one hand and looking at them quietly. Chapter 30-48. Yi Mulan's gaze made Yimubai let go almost immediately. Bai Shuali was going to kill him. As soon as he let go, Bai Shuali was stunned for a moment. Then she turned her head and followed Yimubai's gaze. She also saw Yi Mulan. But as soon as she saw him, the fire in her heart flared. That bastard. He was so hateful. She hugged Yimubai stubbornly and looked at her husband provocatively. She liked Yimubai and didn't like his work machine. Yimubai closed his eyes and sighed.
Dead, dead.
He coughed lightly and said, "Shuali, control yourself. There are so many people watching." Not only did Bai Shuali hug him, but she also wanted to kiss him. Yimubai wanted to push her away, but Bai Shuali fell into Yimubai's arms. The eldest brother of the Yi family held her easily and looked at his brother. "You just came back?" Yimubai didn't feel comfortable. "Yes, I just came back." Yi Mulan's voice was calm. "Grandpa is waiting for you in the study. You go first." "Okay," Yimubai said and looked at Bai Shuali. Bai Shuali shouted, "Don't you dare leave. Is he going to stay here and have sex with you?" Yi Mulan's voice was cold, and then he signaled his brother to leave first. After they left, he held his wife and walked upstairs to the bedroom. As soon as they entered, he threw her away as if she was a germ. Then he locked the door. Bai Shuali almost suffocated. "Yi Mulan, you bastard. What do you want?" He leaned against the door and looked at her quietly. Then he took out his belt slowly. "I want to teach my cheating wife a lesson." Bai Shuali couldn't believe it. She turned around on the big cylindrical bed and screamed, "Yi Mulan, you want domestic violence. Don't forget that you studied law. You are a lawyer. You know the law, and you are breaking the law. In this family, I am the law." He snorted, walked a few steps forward, and dragged her over. Bai Shuali screamed, "You can't do this. I will call for help." Seeing that he was unmoved, she swallowed and said, "I will really call for help. When you are excited in bed, you will also scream for help." A mocking expression appeared on Yi Mulan's face as he tied up the man who was against him. He was really abusing her. Bai Shuali kept screaming, and her cries for help were so loud that the whole villa could hear her. However, from the elders of the Yi clan to the servants, they all pretended not to hear, or perhaps they were used to it. They all knew that this was the boss lecturing his wife. Bai Shuali laid on the ground, her face full of tears. Yi Mulan, I will definitely tell my dad that you bullied me. Okay. Record a video of me hitting you and show it to your dad. And? Or should I tell him that I forced you to make love to me? And? Yi Mulan had already stopped. He sat on the bed and gently caressed the place where he had hit her. He would really hit her, but he would never hurt her. It was just a way to teach a child a lesson. She couldn't tell others. If she said that a husband spanking her was considered domestic violence, no one would believe it. They would only say that it was fun. In this aspect, the boss of the Yi clan was very good at it as a lawyer. Bai Shuali almost exploded when she heard what he said. This bastard. Chapter 32-49. From then on, she felt that Yi Mulan was poisonous. She had to get rid of this man, and the best way was to sleep with Yi Mubai. The Yi family couldn't stand such humiliation, and they would definitely divorce her. Now she couldn't care less about Yi Mubai. Leaving Yi Mulan was the most important thing for her. Yi Mulan's body was over her, and she knew that he was going to make endless love again. Bai Shuali screamed, Yi Mulan, you bastard. If you don't love me, why are you pressing on me every day? I hate you. Go away, do you hear me? They had been married for a few months, and he didn't make any progress in bed. He was still as forceful as before. Yi Mulan didn't have any gentle kiss or slow pace. He liked to be forceful, as if he would be satisfied until she cried and begged him. He was a pervert, but it was useless no matter how she resisted. The more she resisted, the more she scolded him, and the fiercer he bullied her, as if he could break her. Bai Shuali knew that she should be obedient, so that her life would be better. But she hated him, so she didn't want to be obedient. She cursed him until the pain came and left her speechless. This bastard. Later, it became much more harmonious. No matter how much she hated him, she was satisfied in his arms every time. The Yi family didn't care about the private life of this couple. Boss Yi could come whenever he wanted, mainly because he was angry with Bai Shuali. It was 1:00 in the afternoon, and the dining table upstairs had been removed. Yi Mulan took a shower, and when he came out, he saw that Bai Shuali was taking medicine. That was the contraceptive pill which she took every day. His pupils constricted, and he walked over slowly, with only his bathrobe. He took the medicine from her hand and threw it into the dustbin without thinking. You don't want to have children? Yi Mulan, aren't you afraid that a man like you won't be able to have children? Bai Shuali was so angry that she scolded him directly. But as soon as she scolded him, Yi Mulan's expression sank. He pinched her chin with one hand, and the strength was so strong that it seemed to crush her bones. His voice was so deep that it dripped water. Say it again. Huh? Bai Shuali bit her lip and looked up. I'll tell you. Before she could even finish, he gave her a light slap on the face. It was not a slap, but a pat. He then let go of her and said in a cold tone, Let me reiterate, Bai Shuali. Mubai is my bottom line. Don't you dare try to make me a cuckold. Otherwise, I'll crush you to death. Also, respect the elders in the family. Otherwise, I will personally teach you in bed. Bai Shuali wanted to scold him again, but when she saw his expression, she shrank back and didn't say anything. After a while, she said, I don't want to have children. I need a child. Yi Mulan suddenly thought of something. Or give birth to a child, and I can set you free. He didn't want to get married, but if Bai Shuali gave birth to a child, he would consider letting her go. Bai Shuali was startled. She then cursed out loud, Yi Mulan, dream on. He took off his bathrobe and began to put on his clothes. With a cold expression, he said, Then you can stay in the Yi clan. Chapter 3250. Bai Shuali was still lying on the bed. She tilted her head and looked at Yi Mulin. Suddenly, tears fell from the corner of her eyes. Yi Mulin looked at her without much expression on his face. Bai Shuali didn't want him to see her cry. She turned her face to the side and smiled gently. Yi Mulin, I know you hate me. You look down on a rice worm like me. You look down on me for not doing my job properly. But if I don't do anything, I will eat your rice. If you look down on me, then divorce me. What's wrong with you sleeping with me every day? She wiped her tears. You think you're so great? You're a lawyer. Yes, you're busy. Yes, but I'm not born to be your accessory. Are you done? Yi Mulin was already dressed. He said coldly, if you didn't do anything to Lin Cece at the wedding, I wouldn't have to clean up your mess. Bai Shuali jumped up. She turned over and glared at him. She came to my wedding with old Bai. Shouldn't I slap her? You forced Mubai. He was on good terms with Lin Cece. Yi Mulin looked down at her. I know when to stop being stubborn. I'm not as good-tempered as Mubai. Bai Shuali murmured. Yes, you're not him. I'm in hell. Yi Mulin, I've never thought of myself as your wife. I'm your prostitute. Yes, a prostitute. Have you ever done that? That's how women are treated. Shut up. Yi Mulin's face was livid. Do you know what a prostitute is? He leaned over and whispered in her ear, I won't want your child if you're a prostitute. At that moment, Bai Shuali didn't understand what he meant. Instead, she mocked, do you have a throne to inherit? Yi Mulin couldn't communicate with such a shallow woman. He chose to go downstairs. When he closed the door, he whispered, come downstairs to eat later. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Go to hell. Bai Shuali threw a pillow at him, and it hit him on the waist. Yi Mulin looked at her quietly for a few seconds. He bent over to pick it up and threw it on the bed. Then he walked out. The door closed, and Bai Shuali switched on all sorts of vulgarities. But Yi Mulin couldn't hear them. As she cursed, she began to cry again. She had wanted to marry someone for many years, but in the end, she had married a demon. After a long time, she finally went downstairs. Yi Mulin was no longer at the dining table. The servants said that the young master had gone to the office. He was a complete workaholic. He worked on Sundays and seemed to spend all his time at home in bed with her. He was clearly a pervert and a madman. The magazines outside had made him look like a celibate Prince Charming. Bah, his rough style in bed was as if he had never had a woman in his previous life. Bai Shuali was eating, but she didn't have much of an appetite. She used her fork to poke at the food and looked up to ask the servant, where's Mubai? The servant's mood was complicated. Everyone in the Yi family knew that the eldest young madam was supposed to marry the second young master, but the second young master ran away from the marriage, so the eldest young master took over. In fact, it was good enough that someone took over the eldest young madam, but now the second young master couldn't forget her. The servant hesitated for a moment before saying, Second young master, he isn't here. Chapter 3251. Bai Shuali sneered, I was just asking casually. You seem to think that I am going to climb into his bed. But you are right. I am going to climb into Mubai's bed. Go back and tell your young master that I am a slut, and it is best to tie me up with a chain. The servant lowered his head and didn't dare to say anything. Bai Shuali stretched herself. Go and tell Yi Mulin now. I am going to find my brother-in-law to commit adultery. After that, she walked upstairs slowly. The servant hesitated for a moment and really made a phone call. On the other side, Yi Mulin was driving. He frowned after hearing the phone call. Don't worry about her. Mubai will know what to do. After that, he hung up the phone and took a cigarette from the middle control. In fact, he shouldn't care. It was just a legal fertility machine. She had liked Mubai for a long time. Mubai didn't like her. Even if she seduced Mubai, there would be nothing between them. But he was still a little upset in his heart. He couldn't tell why. Yi family's mansion. When Bai Shuali opened the door of Yi Mubai's bedroom, she was stunned. Yi Mubai was only wrapped in a short bath towel. His whole body couldn't cover anything. His body was very good. She vaguely remembered that her animal husband also had a good body. How could a person who was in the office every day have an 8-pack? Bai Shuali now remembered that he trained her every day and became more and more muscular. Putting aside Yi Mulin, she looked at Lao Bai, whom she had liked for many years. Yi Mubai put his hand on the bath towel and looked at her with a sigh. Shuali, why did you come here? Bai Shuali sat directly on his bed and looked at him. Yi Mubai, don't play dumb. You know what I want to do. Yi Mubai smiled. I will be beaten to death by my eldest brother. Didn't you say that you like me and are willing to let me be beaten to death? Bai Shualon took off her coat and looked at him with a little temptation. He won't beat you to death. He will only divorce me. Yi Mubai stared at her bold and unrestrained manner, still standing there without moving. Actually, it was not that he did not have any feelings for Bai Shuali. They were childhood sweethearts, and he had even seen her in open-top pants. When they were young, she would always follow behind them. She also liked to stick to him, but she was extremely afraid of his elder brother. Whenever she saw Yi Mulin, she would cry. Unexpectedly, he was married now. Yi Mubai sighed softly. Surely, even if you have sex with me, Big Brother won't divorce you for the time being. He doesn't have anyone in his heart. At most, he won't touch you. It will take at least 3 to 5 years. Think about it, are you willing? You won't touch me? Bai Shuali sneered. That's great. Lao Bai, let's do it. Instead, he picked up his clothes and ran out with them, stomping down the stairs. Bai Shuali followed him like this. The servants didn't dare to look, but they reported it to the Yi clan's eldest brother. Bai Shuali was just waiting to be peeled off at night. Yi Mubai's footsteps were very fast. He directly threw his clothes into the car and sat in it, slowly putting on his clothes. Outside the car window, Bai Shuali slammed the car door. Yi Mubai, you coward. You just don't dare. He quickly put on his clothes and rolled down the car window. Yes, I don't dare. I said that my brother will beat me to death. He paused for a moment, his face deep in thought. Surely, you and my brother have been married for a few months. Haven't you tried to understand him? As soon as he finished speaking, the corner of Bai Shuali's mouth twitched slightly. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.